Number 10. Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory was born into a powerful, distinguished family with a dark side. At 15, she married Frederick Nasadi and moved into a castle. Her husband shared some of her interests and built a torture chamber for her enjoyment. Together, they tormented the young servant girls. Elizabeth would buy chunks of flesh from her victims and supposedly bathe in their blood to keep her looking young and healthy. On August 21st, 1614, she was imprisoned alone in her room in her castle where she died. Number 9. Leonarda Cianciulli. Leonarda Cianciulli was a superstitious woman who believes later to human sacrifice. She married Raphael Pansardi in 1914 and became pregnant 17 times. 3 of those pregnancies were ended in miscarriages. Of the 14 children whom she gave birth to, 10 died young. She was very protective of her 4 surviving children. Leonardo's first 2 victims, Faustina Setti and Francesca, were killed and cut into 9 pieces. Their blood was collected and their bodies were dissolved in acid. She dumped the slutty remains into a septic tank. Her 3rd victim, Virginia Ciampo, was killed in the same way as the first 2 victims, but with one difference. Leonardo was so impressed with the body fat that she cooked some of it down, mixed it with a bottle of cologne, and turned it into soap. She was caught and was sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 years in an insane asylum. Number 8. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos was born on February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. She left Michigan and went south and ended up in Florida, where she became a prostitute. She shot and killed 7 men over the course of a year. The body of her first victim, Richard Morey, was found December 1989. The 6th body was found on November 19, 1990. Each victim had been shot, some multiple times. On January 27, 1992, Wuornos was found guilty of killing Richard Morey. During the following month, she pleaded guilty to 5 more murders. Later, she admitted of killing the 7th victim, Peter Sims, whose body was never found. She was sentenced to death for every murder and executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. Number 7. Amalia Dyer. Amalia Dyer was a nurse and a midwife who was also one of the most prolific serial killers in British history. As a baby farmer, she would adopt babies from mothers who wouldn't care for them and promise them a loving home. Instead, she killed the babies. At first, she allowed them to die of starvation and neglect, but she was caught and 6 months in jail. After her release, she continued to kill babies, often by strangling them, depositing of the bodies. She is believed to murder over 200 babies and possibly up to 400 over a period of 20 years. To avoid being caught again, she moved frequently, and Dyer was arrested and was convicted on March 1896 and executed by hanging on Wednesday, June 10, 1896. Number 6. Juana Barraza. Juana Barraza was a professional wrestler in Mexico City whose wrestling name was La Dama del Silencio, the Silent Lady. Her mother was an alcoholic who had traded Juana to men for booze. All her victims were elderly women. Witnesses who saw her near the victim's home described her as having a manly body. This led police and others believed that the killer was a man dressed as a woman. She was arrested as she was running away from the home of Ana Maria de los Reyes, her last victim, who had been strangled. Juana pled guilty to just 1 murder and blamed the arrestment for her mother as the reason for the crime. Juana was found guilty of 16 charges of murder and theft, with 11 of those charges separate counts of murder. She was sentenced to 759 years in prison on March 31, 2008. Number 5. Jane Toppan. Jane Toppan was born in Massachusetts in 1857, orphaned as a young child when her mother died and her father went crazy. She was taken by the Toppan family and eventually adopted the name Jane Toppan. Despite showing signs of emotional instability, Jane trained as a nurse at Cambridge Hospital. There is conflicting information as to whether she completed the training. Either way, she went on to become a private nurse. In that capacity, she first killed both of her landlords in 1895 by poisoning them. In 1899, she also gave a fatal dose to her foster sister, Elizabeth. Her crime seemed to go unnoticed at this time. Topan killed one last person before she was finally arrested on October 26, 1901. Although she confessed to 31 murders, she was not found guilty by reason of insanity and was committed to an insane hospital for the rest of her life. She died there in 1938. Number 4. Nanny Ghost. Nanny Ghost killed members of her own family by poisoning them. Her first 2 victims was her 2 own children with her first husband. Her third victim was her grandson, who died within 3 days arriving at her home. 3 months later, her second husband, Frank Harrison, became ill and died within a week. Their deaths occurred in 1945. She was finally stopped after her husband, number 5, Samuel Dawes, died 4 months after they were married. A required autopsy was found and had been poisoned with enough arsenic to kill 10 men. Nanny confessed to killing 10 people, was only tried and convicted for the murder of Samuel Dawes only. She pleaded guilty on May 17, 1955 and was sentenced to life in prison at Oklahoma State Penitentiary. She died there of leukemia in 1965. Number 3. Miyuki Nakayama. Miyuki Nakayama is the most prolific serial killer in Japanese history. She was a midwife and the director of a maternity hospital. Many babies born in the hospital belonged to poor families who would not take care of them. Unfortunately, there was no social programs available. Miyuki often killed these infants by neglecting them, by the help of her husband and the doctor Nakayama, helped by falsifying death certificates for the murdered babies. At trial, Miyuki, her husband, and Dr. Nakayama argued that they were providing a service that the parents of the baby should be blamed. Miyuki was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Her husband and Dr. Nakayama were sentenced to 4 years each. On appeal, all their sentences were cut in half. Outrage over this led to the legalization of abortion in Japan on June 24, 1949. Number 2. Dorothea Puente. Dorothea Puente's first criminal activities were small time. She was caught forging checks and served 6 months in jail. Later in 1960, she was arrested in brothel and served 90 days in jail. Shortly after her release, she was arrested for vagrancy and imprisoned for another 90 days. After that, she went straight for a while and began working as a nurse, cared for both disabled and elderly people in private homes. She went on to manage boarding houses. Dorothea bought a large house in Sacramento that she used to have a boarding house for disabled and elderly people. Then she started stealing Social Security checks of her residents. The police became involved when 2 boarders were reported missing. Using shovels, officers dug up the first body in Dorothea's backyard. A total of 7 bodies were found there, but many more former bodies are still missing. Dorothea was charged with 9 murders and found guilty of 3. She was given 2 life sentences. Number 1. Lavina Fisher. Lavina Fisher is the only serial killer on this list who was never convicted of murder. She and her husband, Sean Fisher, was part of a group of highwaymen. They were both convicted of a highway robbery, which was a capital offense in the early 1800s. Once thought to be certain, Lavina's status as a serial killer is now debated. Factual details of her role are scarce, but there are many legends that surround it. Here's what we know to be certain. Lavina and John Fisher owned a hotel outside Charleston, South Carolina, and called it the 6 Mile Wayfair House. From there, people started disappearing at the hotel, and who was to blame? Lavina and John, her husband. Even though they didn't have evidence that the disappearance was because of her and her husband, John and Lavina Fisher were sentenced to death. Since South Carolina's law at the time stated that a married woman cannot be executed, John Fisher was hanged 1 day before Lavina. This made her a widow, not a married woman. At the time of execution, legend says that she was wearing her wedding gown when she was hanged. Lavina Fisher is often called the first American female serial killer, but she might not have killed anyone at all. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want me guys to do a certain topic or whatever you guys want me to do, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much.